Death or Prison podcast brought to you by Lean On Me USA. Today our discussion centers with Florida Department of Corrections Secretary Mark Inch and his plan, Roadmap to Restoration.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. To my right, Mr. Elmo Golden. To my left, the Florida Secretary, Department of Corrections, Mr. Mark Inch. And we're continuing a conversation about the roadmap to restoration. And we've talked about mentoring and we've talked about the importance of volunteers. But one thing that we haven't talked about, Jerry Maguire, the movie, they made the famous statement, "Show me the money." We know that there's money involved and finance involved in that. How does that interwork or interact in what we're doing or what you're doing, Mr.?
If you kind of wonder, what does the secretary actually do in a system as large as the Florida Department of Corrections? All the good things we've talked about and the evidence of it starting to manifest itself, let's recognize that that's not me. Thank you for the compliments, but that's not me. It's a lot of executive staff that come up with the ideas, develop the ideas, and then it works its way and I think improves as it comes down to the facility level. I mean, wardens, assistant wardens for programs and ops, the colonels, right, down through the white shirts, down to the lieutenants, the line staff that, give the energy to everything we've talked about in the previous programs. We have teachers, we have the vocational trainers. We've talked a lot about the volunteers, but I don't want to lose sight that a lot of the good you're seeing is them. Where I spend a lot of my time is addressing the resourcing of the system. And it's the relationship I have with the Office of the Governor and the relationship I have with our senators and representatives. It is the leadership of our governor. It is the funding and the statutory limitations, boundaries is the better term, that come from our laws that I have to work with inside to address the needs of our system. So. You guys have been in this. You've been in this system a lot. It's no mystery of resourcing, especially on the programming side, that over years and years, has become more constrained. But that did reverse. So Governor DeSantis has been very supportive of our step-by-step approach to creating these positive choices in the institutions, in the positive choices for our offender population in community corrections, and the money it takes to do that, because it takes real money to do that. We will look at last year's budget. There was such evidence of executive leadership support for our agency and legislative support for our agency in the budget that we're living this year that came from last year's process. And it wasn't just budget. I mean, money applied to career and technical education, an extra $3 million of that. Money applied to increased substance use bed space and treatment. Money applied, across the board, as well as money applied to the security side, which helps create the environment in which folks can focus on the positive choices. I think what was one of the most telling pieces of legislation was the reestablishment of the Inmate Welfare Trust Fund. I just want you to think about this is, for 17 years, that did not exist. And part of that was the authority of the agency to purchase recreation equipment. Everything you saw out there, if you were on a state system facility, was donations, has been donations. As that legislation went through the process, and then in the last week of session last year, when it came before the Senate floor, not a single dissenting vote. Every senator voted in the affirmative to reestablish the Inmate Welfare Trust Fund, to give the authorities, and they seeded it with $2.5 million that we can use for recreation programming, for education programming, for for teachers, and I mean it's a broad authority that I'm given on how to use that $2.5 million. 2 days later, it was an evening. It was over on the House side. Again, not a single dissenting vote from a single representative to reestablish the Inmate Welfare Trust Fund after 17 years. That's significant. That is significant.
You said that twice, and in my mind, I'm trying to figure out how would they understand or know that by reinstituting the welfare fund, it would assist in helping the population. I'm trying to figure that part out.
Because that's my job, is to explain that connection. Did I do a lot of closed-door visits with our legislature? Yes, and that's my job. And to say this is why it's important, and when it's an education process, and the importance is, there's that which I say in testimony. So last week I was before the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee, for criminal justice. The first group that works our budget in the process for next year. And there's that which is said in testimony, and then sometimes there's that what is said, one-on-one, to help educate and to understand the importance of providing positive choices. There can't be an absence of positive choices, of that which just frankly brings the temperature down in a facility and keeps folks from being idle.
Did you know that by having that welfare fund, and so that you can add this to your conversation, is that even a stamp and an envelope that the men and women apply for when they're indigent, they don't have any money for it. But that's life-saving sometimes, to where you can have contact with your family, your kids, your friends, your loved ones. And so it's more than, it may look like a small thing by not having that, but then you can look at reducing violence also by having a way that the men and women can reduce stress by playing games, by having a football or a basketball out there, or maybe blowing off some steam by lifting weights. So during that time that you're talking about, that the inmate welfare was taken away, I was incarcerated. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, it's nothing, what we're going to do? And so by having it reinstated, it reduces a lot of the stress that's there. And it also creates that environment now that there is something for me to do. There is a way I can stay in contact with my family. There is education that's there now based on the money that's being provided. So that's very good and very helpful.
And though we have other funding sources, especially to address support and communication for those with no money, you're right. It just gave so much. It gave so much more flexibility to support on the programming side. But the point I'm really trying to make is this should be viewed as a sign of hope, of the attention of the legislature, the attention of the governor and his executive staff on the needs of our system. Because it doesn't just stop there. A really good idea, I'd love to take credit for it, but it came right out of the Office of the Governor, was to establish what's called a direct support unit organization. It's the Florida Foundation for Correctional Excellence. And in its design, it creates a mechanism by which we can interact with the business community to accept donations of the business community into our career and technical education programs. So expansions that we've done. When I first got here, we had one location for a commercial driver's license. Big need for truck drivers, for those that have a commercial driver's license. Doesn't it make sense then to apply and expand that program out further across our system, which we are doing? And doesn't it make sense then to reach out to these major trucking companies that will benefit from our men and women coming out with, either with the full licensing aspect to it, or at least everything short of the driver's test. But we're even working on a program for driver's testing for at least some of that educated population. if they like this and they need more, okay, buy us some simulators, pay for more instructors, and we will increase that amount. So again, this was an announcement formulated and set up, by the governor's office and the governor himself, and he was the one that did that announcement out at Operation New Hope, is where we did it last year for the Florida Foundation of Correctional Excellence. Now, I have to be, realistic. Then COVID came. COVID, what a gut punch. And it was a gut punch to the nation, to the world, to the nation, to our state, and to Florida in terms of adjustments. But one of the real, and folks just have to realize this, is we live in a state, I like this, we live in a state that doesn't have a state income tax and has a balanced budget. The consequence is we have to have a balanced budget. And so in a COVID year where general revenue for the state, based on what is normally that wonderful group of tourists that come that pay our state income tax with their hotel tax and however else that's done, is that revenue's decreased. And so what we're struggling with this year is the realization that likely there's less in general revenue, and that has an impact. It had, the recession back, was that in 2008, had an impact, of course, on funding. And so even with that, yesterday the governor put forward his budget to the legislature, which they'll now work with. And there's still all that very clear evidence of him creating the condition to address the work-life balance of our staff so they're better rested. And as we work to try to get past the amount of mandatory overtime that we do, which is just not positive, that. We all know that in any system. But, continued increasing for increasing funds. I mean, this is not even, taking anything away that we already had in our budget, but increasing funds, for career and technical education and for, those creating the environment and the ability to continue to build those positive choices, facility by facility by facility. But it is real that resourcing impacts capability. So sometimes we go looking for other people's money. I was very excited that for a long period federally, what used to be the Pell Grant being very actively used, within the incarcerated population nationwide, well, we know that was curtailed. There was still an experimental program, and we still had that, Gateway College, for example, several locations. We were, even under the old system, able to expand. When I first got here, I wrote a letter to every chancellor, every president of every Florida university and college, and junior college, because that's how it starts. The school has to apply to the federal government to do higher education Pell Grant. And I wanted to signal to them, you ask and we'll make it work. So wherever you're, well, of course the change now is the Pell Grant in its original form has now been reestablished. The opportunity has exceeded. I will now be sending out another letter to every chancellor, president, and school individual to say, please apply. You apply. We'll figure out how to set up the classroom for your professor, so that we can extend higher education, because the statistics are very clear. The linkage between education and opportunity and recidivism rates, undeniable. As I reach out to volunteers, as we reach out to the business community, as we reach out to other granting funding sources, we're doing that very aggressively, especially recognizing this year's challenges with the state's general revenue. But even with the general revenue predicted for the next fiscal year, our governor sent a very, very positive message to our system and to public safety, writ large, let alone, the other very key aspects of the budget on the environment and the like. But he sent a very clear signal, and I'm encouraged by that, and I hope both our staff and our incarcerated population and our offenders under supervision they should also be encouraged by that.
Like Elmo, when I was in for those 14 and a half years, there's a good portion of that where there was not a lot of resources available to you. And if you wanted to do something positive, your selections were few. Not even to mention the opportunity to now have the possibility of going to school and furthering your education, which I believe is huge, sitting on this side of the fence versus the other side, and knowing when you're going to apply for a job, how important it is to be able to write down certain skills. To have a CDL is beyond means. That's not a minimum wage job. That's just $16, $17, $18 an hour jobs out of the gate. How much of that do you believe or foresee in the future being able to expand? How hopeful are you in that regard?
I'm very hopeful. I approached this job, this opportunity, taking a multi-year perspective. It took a lot of years to get us of where the Florida Department of Corrections was to where we were at the start of this administration. And part of accepting the invitation of the governor and moving from the frigid north to the balmy south, as if that would. They did tell me the beaches in Tallahassee were great. So there's no beaches. But anyways, but it was really with a multi-year understanding of step by step by step. It's not whether we're going to get better. It's at what pace we get better. And that's, we have to be realistic that the priorities, there's competing priorities across the state, the competing priorities of environment and of education and of public safety. And that's tough work of our legislature and of our governor to find that right balance within a balanced budget.
Secretary, how many short sentence institutions are there now?
Okay, so there's 5 because we have 5 reception centers. We do that regionally. So 4 male and then the 1 female, the Florida Women's Reception Center. So the short sentence program are at those reception centers except in the Northeast. The Reception and Medical Center in the Northeast, we don't have the capacity there to do that. So we've shifted it to Hamilton, and that's where we do that program.
We're glad you're here in the state of Florida with us, but we understand that you were the Federal Bureau of Prisons secretary for 8 months. What led to that decision, and how did that play out with you coming here?
So my first opportunity after 35 years in the military was that I did have the distinct honor of leading the men and women of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And I want to tell you that working with them was a pleasure, was an honor. They took a piece of my heart, and they still own it. But yes, after 8 months, I did resign due to matters of conscience, because not only the men and women that worked at the Federal Bureau of Prisons, but the inmates of the Federal Bureau of Prisons deserved to have a secretary that was influential. And I came to the determination that I was not influential within the Department of Justice, and they deserved to have a director that was. The current director, Michael Carvajal, is an amazing professional. Why did the Lord have me there for 8 months? Well, I learned a lot. I think that's why he had me there for 8 months. I learned a lot. And my wife was still working at Department of Defense. So, we got to cohabitate. That's always wonderful. And so, but then when that passed, I do believe the good Lord puts us where we're supposed to be. And so when this opportunity opened up and the invitation came from then, Governor-elect DeSantis, seemed like a good fit. It seemed to be the right timing, and so I think I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I was only supposed to be there for 8 months.
You speak highly of Governor DeSantis. You almost make me want to follow him. And I thank you for the information, because before this interview, I really didn't agree with some of his policies. But it's because of my ignorance, lack of other information. And so you're telling me that now he's actually working more so for the transitional part of guys getting out. And I want to thank you for that, because I think that the more we start building bridges with each other, the more information is passed, we can also make intelligent decisions about our next move.
Yeah, really, without a doubt, our governor is very intent on public safety. And, of course, he knows, he understands criminal justice systems from his experiences in life and where he's worked. And so he recognizes where we are within that system. And so, yes, I absolutely appreciate support. I'll tell you, the other thing I appreciate of him is that he does not hesitate to let it be known, his faith foundation and its impact on, his decisions of public service. If you think back to the inauguration, he did not have an inauguration parade. Think of, this is the ultimate of I won. Everybody come out and wave at me. And he goes, nah, I don't think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to baptize my child, have my child baptized when there would, and not only does that speak to character, but he doesn't hesitate to say, that's what I did. We did not do an inauguration parade because it was more important to me with family here to do the baptism ceremony of my child. So for me and for what motivates me for public service, I find, therefore, him very easy to follow.
And just for our listeners, what would you actually say to one of the guys sitting in a cell, believing that there's no hope and that there's nobody championing for them or speaking out for them? What would you say to that guy?
Yeah. So at least for the men and women of the Florida Department of Corrections, this probably isn't the first time you've seen my face. If you've turned on your JPay tablet, you've seen either first read or then later watched the videos that my comms director makes me do. I would simply ask for you to give our staff and our leaders the time to organize and marshal the resources that we're fighting for, that the legislature does apportion to us, and the leadership direction that has come from our governor. Give us the time to make adjustments. The Florida Department of Corrections is a big system, and actions. There is just a lag between action and results. And so we are working as an agency very, very hard to address your needs, and we're trying to create the conditions and environments where you can make good choices because those choices are available for you to make. At some point in this process, though, you do have to make the choice. So you can make the positive choices that it's going to impact your life now and absolutely impact your life into the future, so that we can put you on that roadmap to restoration back to your community. And if you're not going back to your community, that we can find a path for positive activity and service, within our system. And we will continue to look in that direction. But you have to make a choice. And so that's what we're going to be working on year over year. And so I ask for your patience, and when those positive choices are there, take the positive choice.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for spending your time here with us over these past few segments and talking with us about the roadmap to restoration, talking with us about the importance of mentors, talking with us about the importance of volunteers. And you've heard us over the few segments talk about involvement in being able to talk to your loved ones or your family about them being able to get involved in the process. This is the Death or Prison podcast brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. This is Mr. Elmo Golden. This is the Secretary of Florida Department of Corrections, Mr. Mark Inch. We say choose life.
Lean on Me USA, in partnership with Alpha USA Prison and Reentry, wants to help you find a welcoming church, no matter where you live. Please call 314-607-8850.